Welcome to Wisdom of the Bible channel. There he sat, once the mightiest king the world had ever known, the man whose wisdom was as vast as the sands on the seashore and whose wealth was beyond imagination. King Solomon, the son of the great King David, had ruled Israel with unmatched splendor. Yet now, in the twilight of his life, his heart was heavy, his spirit weighed down by memories and regrets. The grand halls of his palace felt emptier than ever, adorned with golden brilliance but missing the happiness that once filled them. The majestic throne, carved from ivory and coated with pure gold, did not seem like a mark of power anymore, but rather a reminder of vain worldly pursuits. Solomon's hands, once uplifted in reverence and prayer, now lay idly on his knees, and his wise eyes, once bright with insight and promise, stared vacantly ahead. As his life slipped away, Solomon remembered his journey, from a modest young ruler seeking guidance to a sovereign whose heart had wandered due to temptations and uncertain choices. It all began with a dream, a holy meeting that would change his path forever. Solomon recalled that night in Gibeon, when God appeared to him, offering to grant any wish. The young king could have asked for riches, victory over his enemies, or a long life. Instead, he humbly requested understanding, wanting a discerning heart to lead his people and judge right from wrong. God was deeply pleased. He not only gave Solomon remarkable wisdom, but also great prosperity and fame, more than any leader of his day. He promised him many years as well, but with one condition. Solomon had to live in obedience to God's commands. It was a holy agreement, a binding covenant between heaven and earth. When Solomon awoke the next morning, he was filled with purpose and divine grace. His first major test arrived quickly, involving two mothers each claiming the same infant. Solomon's ruling was both daring and insightful. He proposed to split the baby, knowing the genuine mother would give up her claim to keep her child safe. Everyone marveled, talking in hushed voices about their king's insight from God. Word of Solomon's wisdom traveled swiftly, reaching far-off nations and fascinating rulers and thinkers everywhere. As his realm prospered, Solomon's fame peaked. Kings and queens from afar came to see his splendor. Among them came the Queen of Sheba, a ruler of enormous wealth and influence, arriving with a caravan of gold, spices, and precious stones. She came not only to see his fortune, but also to test his celebrated understanding. She asked tough riddles that would stump the wisest minds at home, but Solomon answered each with clarity and depth, leaving her astounded. She declared that the rumors had not done justice to what she witnessed. The truth far exceeded the stories she had heard. Yet it was not just wisdom that shaped Solomon's rule. It was also the unmatched wealth that pervaded his nation. Ships laden with gold, silver, ivory, and exotic creatures arrived every 3 years, bringing treasures from distant lands. Lavish feasts echoed with song and merriment, while massive parades displayed the king's unmatched excess. Central to his accomplishments stood the temple, a brilliant structure built for Israel's God. Fashioned with cedar from Lebanon, decorated with gold and fine gems, it was more than a grand building. It was the divine dwelling place among his people. At its dedication, Solomon knelt before the altar in humble prayer. Lord God of Israel, there is no God like you in heaven above or on earth below, you who keep your covenant of love with your servants, who continue wholeheartedly in your way. A cloud of glory filled the temple, a visible sign of God's favor. All Israel bowed in awe and gratitude. It was a moment of pure worship, and the kingdom enjoyed peace. But as time wore on, Solomon began to change. The young king who once knelt in humility, seeking guidance to rule fairly, had become a different man. Success gradually led him to place power, riches, and ambition above the devotion he once held. The blessings that were meant to honor God had grown into objects of obsession. Solomon wanted to secure his rule and enlarge his fame, so he formed pacts with nearby nations. In ancient times, marriage was not just a union of two people, it was a formal pact between countries for peace and shared benefit. Solomon, clever in diplomacy and intent on protecting his throne, turned to marriage as a way to confirm alliances. One foreign princess led to another, then to 10, then many. Royal brides from Moab, Ammon, Edom, Sidon, and further lands entered the stately courts of Jerusalem, each bringing her customs, beliefs, and most troubling, her deities. What began as practical alliances became unrestrained indulgence. The king who had once shown sound judgment was fascinated by power and luxury, blinded by his success. Soon, Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines, 1,000 women whose beauty and political ties embellished his kingdom but eroded his soul. God's warning faintly echoed in his mind, almost forgotten because of pride and desire. God had plainly said in Deuteronomy that Israel must not intermarry with foreign nations. You shall not intermarry with them, for they would turn away your sons from following me to serve other gods. But Solomon, despite all his wisdom, ignored these clear instructions. He felt invincible, chosen by God, thinking no harm could come in his glory. He was wise in judicial matters, yet foolish in his heart, assuming his achievements and God's favors freed him from true obedience. At first it seemed minor. One foreign bride wanted a small shrine, a private altar to worship the God of her homeland. It appeared harmless, a little gesture for a cherished queen. But that tiny step opened the door. One altar became two, then more, until altars and high places for foreign gods rose around Jerusalem. Chemosh, the god of Moab, was given honor. Molech, the Ammonite idol known for child sacrifice, stood there by the king's decree. Ashtoreth of Sidon also had a shrine where rituals of fertility and lust were practiced, detestable to the God of Israel. What once seemed unimaginable grew commonplace. The man who created a temple for the Lord that amazed the world also sanctioned places of worship for false gods. He who once prayed for God's nearness now allowed idolatry in his own palace. Seeing their king's behavior, the people began to question their dedication to Yahweh. If Solomon, the wisest king, could support these gods, why shouldn't they? The nation meant to stand apart as a light for God now merged with the cultures it was supposed to reject. The king who had once declared truth with certainty now stumbled in spiritual turmoil, his heart torn by countless desires and conflicting allegiances. The prophet's warnings and David's teachings were drowned out by seductive voices in his courts. Solomon had once written, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." Yet his heart was now divided, swayed in every direction by 1,000 temptations. The wisdom he shared with the world was lost on him as he let go of his devotion, forsaking the God who had given him everything. People might wonder how someone so wise could lose faith. The answer lies partly in his lust for political power, but mostly in his slow drift away from God. Abundance made him complacent, authority made him arrogant, and indulgence made him numb. What began as seemingly small compromises, like giving in to a wife's request for an altar, turned into consistent disobedience. It wasn't that Solomon forgot God's truth. He knew it well. But his heart lost its passion, and he no longer felt moved in God's presence. He convinced himself that his royal status excused his actions, ignoring that God judges the heart, not one's achievements. He justified these choices, insisting that small concessions would never hurt his faith. After all, he was Solomon, the wise and blessed king. In his later years, Solomon's heart was weighed down with regret. The gleaming walls of his palace seemed to mock him, whispering of lost devotion and a spirit in decline. The one who prayed for wisdom to guide Israel uprightly now found himself trapped by the very perils he warned others about. His reflections turned dark, recorded in the book of Ecclesiastes. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. He thought about his prosperity, pleasures, and achievements, seeing them all as temporary and hollow, chasing the wind. He had chased knowledge, delight, and riches, but none could fill the emptiness left by his spiritual fall. Though brilliant beyond measure, Solomon succumbed to vanity and worldly temptations. His heart, once firmly set on God, wandered in search of power, wealth, and alliances. God's anger did not remain hidden. He appeared to Solomon twice, urging him to stay faithful, but Solomon persisted in going astray. The punishment was sharp, yet tempered by mercy. God declared that the kingdom would be torn from Solomon's line, though not during Solomon's lifetime, out of respect for David. His son Rehoboam would bear the burden of a divided nation. As his final days approached, Solomon sensed the kingdom's impending split, the breakdown of what was once whole. His once celebrated wisdom seemed to echo faintly, as if from a distance. He had built sprawling structures, authored profound proverbs, but his greatest deed should have been a heart loyal to God. Weary and sorrowful, Solomon spoke his last words to himself. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. He realized too late that obeying God was the true prize. As twilight fell over Jerusalem, the once great king passed from history, leaving a legacy of both greatness and tragedy, a lesson on the ruin of abandoning God. King Solomon's life story is both uplifting and tragic, carrying lessons for all generations. His early devotion and unmatched wisdom testify to the blessings found in seeking God with one's whole heart. Yet his downfall reveals the peril of pride and moral indifference. In Solomon's path from humble dedication to ruin, we see enduring truths for our own time. One of the key lessons is the need to keep a close walk with God, regardless of triumphs or wealth. When Solomon was young and lowly, he asked the Lord for wisdom to govern with justice. God honored this sincere desire with not only wisdom, but also riches, honor, and peace. But as he grew in power, the very blessings meant to honor God became traps. Wealth made him complacent, power made him proud, and ease made him indifferent. He got so caught up in worldly things that he neglected his devotion. This shows us how easily faith can fade when life is prosperous. As with Solomon, success can blind us to our true need for God. No matter how blessed or successful we are, we cannot allow self-importance, wealth, or pleasure to overshadow our walk with the Lord. A heart devoted to God is far more precious than any earthly riches or knowledge. Another vital warning is the danger of small compromises. At first, Solomon's compromises seemed small. He made alliances through royal marriages, allowed a few altars for foreign wives, but these harmless-seeming actions eventually led him to widespread idolatry. His unraveling did not happen overnight, but through gradual, unchecked decisions that dulled his conscience. This still applies to us today. We may excuse small moral lapses, telling ourselves they don't really affect our beliefs, but like Solomon, we can end up far from God if these choices pile up. We must stay watchful, always evaluating our steps to ensure they align with God's will. Even trivial decisions can steer us closer or further from the Lord. Perhaps the saddest part of Solomon's tale is how his failure didn't just harm him, it hurt the entire nation. His rebellion caused Israel to break apart, stirring chaos for many generations. This teaches us that our choices, both right and wrong, impact those around us. As parents, guides, or models, our actions inevitably influence others. Solomon's story reminds us to think carefully about how our decisions affect those who follow us. His life encourages us to keep God first, to guard against becoming lax, and to stay devoted even when tempted by the world's pleasures. How we end our journey matters more than how we begin. Let us heed his mistakes and follow a path of firm faithfulness toward the one who offers wisdom, blessings, and eternal life. Solomon's story is not just about a king who lost his way. It warns all of us. No amount of wisdom, influence, or riches can satisfy a heart that turns away from God. His life shows that our greatest successes mean nothing without steadfast obedience. May we learn from Solomon's errors and choose humility and devotion, keeping our hearts faithful before the Lord. In the end, we are not defined by our assets or titles, but by the faithfulness with which we follow God's commands. There he sat, a man named Job, faced with the complete loss of all he once cherished in one crushing moment. Everything he knew, his thriving life, his happy home, was gone, leaving behind only the rubble of what had been. His story is one of profound sorrow, relentless suffering, and a faith that would not break even under the most harrowing trials. My name is Job, and in days past, I stood as a wealthy and respected man, blessed by God and praised by my community. But those blessings were stripped away one by one, each calamity more devastating than the last. As you follow me through these trials that pushed me to the brink, may you find hope in your own darkest times, and see that even in the deepest grief, a ray of light can still glow. In the land of Uz, I was known not just for my fortune, but for my strong sense of justice and devotion to God. I had vast flocks and herds, 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys. My property was extensive, and my success was a symbol of God's kindness. Beyond my great wealth, my greatest blessings were my children, 7 sons and 3 daughters. each precious and a source of joy. They made my house lively, a testament to God's generosity. Each morning before sunrise, I offered burnt offerings for every child, in case any of them had erred in their hearts. I was a man who revered God and avoided evil, striving to live uprightly in a world that I believed to be just. People around me respected my name, and my presence brought admiration. My opinions were eagerly sought, as I was recognized not just as rich, but also as a man guided by wisdom. I acted with integrity, revealing an inner righteousness that shaped my conduct. My faith was genuine, running deep in my spirit, trusting that God rewarded the righteous and dealt fairly with the wicked. I saw myself as proof of this truth, believing that my prosperity and my devotion were interconnected. Yet one day, everything changed. In a single, terrifying sequence of events, I lost all that I held dear. My sons and daughters were feasting at my eldest son's house when a servant raced to me, terror etched on his face. The oxen were plowing, he reported, and the donkeys were grazing nearby when the Sabeans attacked. They took the animals and killed the servants, and I'm the only one who got away. As he spoke, another arrived, his voice quavering. Fire from God fell and burned the sheep and the servants, and I'm the only one who escaped. Before I could even understand this, another came. The Chaldeans formed 3 raiding groups, stole your camels, and killed the servants, and I'm the only survivor. And then the last, most crushing news followed. Your children were feasting, he said, tears in his eyes, when a fierce wind from the desert struck the house and it collapsed on them. They are all gone. In that unimaginable instant, my world fell apart. Every precious thing I had, my property, my servants, my beloved children, was gone, wiped away as if it had never been. I stood in ruins, my soul engulfed in sorrow I could not grasp. In my deepest grief, I tore my robe and shaved my head, outward signs of mourning. I collapsed to the ground, overwhelmed by my losses. Yet in all my pain, I could not condemn God. Instead, I spoke words that would echo through the ages. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. But my ordeal did not end. While losing my children and possessions was devastating, my own body soon became a battleground. Painful boils appeared from my feet to my head, turning me into a figure of torment. In utter misery, I sat on ashes, scraping my sores with a broken piece of pottery, my mind on the edge of collapse. My wife, overwhelmed by her own anguish, could only see escape in death. She urged me to curse God, to release myself from my agony by giving up. Her words hurt me deeply, but they rose from a heart consumed by sorrow. Even so, I would not discard my faith. You speak like a foolish woman, I gently replied. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? Although I was in constant pain, I did not turn against God with my words, holding fast to what faith I still possessed. News of my plight reached 3 companions, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, who journeyed to console me. On seeing the severity of my condition, they were shocked, tearing their robes and weeping. They sat with me on the ground for 7 days and nights, not speaking because they saw how deep my suffering was. Eventually, I broke the silence. I could no longer hold back my bitterness. I cursed the day I was born. May the day of my birth vanish, I moaned, and the night that declared, a baby boy is conceived. Why did I not perish at birth, breathing my last before seeing this cruel world? My friends, stunned by my laments, then spoke. They were certain my pain must be punishment for hidden wrongdoing. Eliphaz, the oldest, spoke first, pulling from visions and experiences. Think now, he said, who that was innocent ever died? Where have the upright been wiped out? As I've seen, those who sow evil reap it. Bildad and Zophar mirrored Eliphaz's belief, urging me to repent and regain God's favor. They felt my suffering was just retribution for an unconfessed offense. Bildad even hinted that my children brought their own destruction by their sins, and Zophar, more blunt, reproached me. Oh, how I wish God would speak and disclose his wisdom to you, for he has passed over some of your sin. Their words, meant to help, only drove me deeper into despair. How could they be so sure of my guilt when in my heart I knew of no grave sin? Their accusations hurt me more than the sores on my body. Their endless arguments wore me down, and in frustration I snapped. "Doubtless you are the people, and wisdom will die with you," I retorted sarcastically. "But I have understanding too. I'm not beneath you." They kept insisting they knew God's mind, but I couldn't accept it. I knew I had lived honorably, revering God's commands. Yet here I was, stripped of everything. Their words did not ease my pain, they only magnified my loneliness. Days turned into weeks, and a storm of doubt swirled inside me. The beliefs that had once supported my faith seemed fragile now. Why should a just God let evildoers thrive while the upright suffer? Why was he silent in the face of such injustice? In despair, I challenged God. "Why do the wicked live on?" I asked. "They grow old, powerful, with their families around them, their homes safe from fear, no rod of God upon them." I yearned to stand before God and plead my case, but it felt as though he was far away, unreachable. If only I knew where to find him, I lamented. I'd lay my arguments before him to hear his reply, but despite my urgent pleas, God remained silent. My cries for fairness seemed to vanish into emptiness, and my appeals for mercy met an oppressive stillness. This silence cut deeper than any physical affliction I endured, as though God had turned away and left me alone in the dark. Yet even in my frustration and bitterness, a spark of faith lived on. Though my view of God's ways was shattered, I could not fully abandon my trust in his goodness. "Though he slay me," I declared, trembling with both fear and hope, "yet will I hope in him. I will defend my ways to his face, for I believe that will lead to my deliverance, for no evildoer could dare approach him." Finally, after what felt like ages, God answered. But he did not bring me the comfort I had been expecting, nor the explanation I demanded. He came in a whirlwind, matching the turmoil in my soul. He responded with a flood of questions, not answers, challenging the heart of my assumptions. "Who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge?" he asked, his voice shaking my core. "Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation?" God continued. "Tell me if you understand. Who decided its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched a line upon it? On what were its bases set, and who laid its cornerstone, while the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy?" As these words rained down on me, I was overwhelmed by how little I truly comprehended. How could I, a mere mortal bound by time and space, dare to challenge the one who created all that exists? I realized I was but dust, a flicker in his vast universe. God pressed on, describing the boundaries of oceans, the courses of stars, and the mysteries of the deep earth. He spoke of creatures like the behemoth and leviathan, beyond human control. Each detail underscored his sovereignty and the marvel of creation. His ways, I saw, surpassed human logic or explanation. By the end, I stood undone. My pride had led me to demand answers from God, yet my perspective was so limited. I realized how rash it was to think he owed me an explanation. I admitted my ignorance. "I am unworthy," I said, trembling. "How can I reply to you? I'll place my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no reply. Twice, but I will say no more." Yet God was not finished. "Would you condemn me to justify yourself?" he asked. His words mirrored my flawed reasoning. "Would you question my justice? Do you have an arm like God's? Does your voice thunder like mine?" In that moment, my self-righteous demands collapsed. I saw how his wisdom was infinitely beyond me, and that I was in no position to measure his actions. I understood then that his plans were higher than my own, his thoughts past my grasp. Moved to remorse, I bowed in humility. "I know you can do everything," I confessed. "No plan of yours can be thwarted." You asked, "Who is this that obscures my plan without knowledge?" I spoke of things too wonderful for me to know. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. And so I loathed my presumptions and repented in dust and ashes. After God finished speaking, he turned his gaze toward Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. "I am angry with you," he declared. because you have not spoken truth about me, as my servant Job has." Then he told them to offer sacrifices and ask me to pray on their behalf, promising to accept my prayer and spare them. In a humbling twist, those who had accused me so confidently now needed my intercession. They had insisted my affliction was my own fault, yet now they approached me in repentance, recognizing their error. I prayed earnestly for them, and God, in His mercy, accepted my prayer. Then God reversed my fortunes, doubly blessing all I had lost. I had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. My riches were restored, but God's restoration didn't stop there. He blessed me again with 7 sons and 3 daughters, and my daughters were famed throughout the land for their beauty. In this, God displayed His kind favor, a radiance that shone from within them as well. I lived a long life, seeing my children and their children to the 4th generation. My story became a living reminder of how faith can endure suffering and of God's ultimate authority. What began in tragedy ended in redemption, a message that has brought comfort and challenge to countless people. My life, once shattered, stood as evidence that even in our darkest hours, God can create something redemptive, far more wonderful than we might ever imagine. My story is not just about anguish. It is about how sorrow can lead us to a deeper knowledge of God. It shows that while we may not always grasp why we suffer, we can trust that God's purpose is unfolding even in our pain. Looking back, I recall the words I cried out when everything was lost. "The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." These words, formed at the height of my despair, became the anthem of my faith. I discovered that real faith isn't about escaping hardship, but trusting in God's goodness when life is most cruel. So take my lessons to heart. Whatever trials you face, hold on tight to your belief in God. Remember that He sees your agony, that He is working everything for your good. And when you're weighed down by life's storms, when hope seems dim, let my example remind you that if God can bring me through the flames and rebuild my life, He can do the same for you. Turn to Him, and you will find the strength you need. May God watch over you, and may you find rest in His presence. Hi everyone. Today we're exploring a remarkable subject in the Bible. 3 people who, as the scriptures tell us, did not die in the usual sense. Enoch, Elijah, and Melchizedek, each taken by God in extraordinary circumstances. Who were these unique individuals, and what can we learn from their astonishing experiences? Let us look closely at their stories and uncover the deeper insights they hold. Enoch is our first example, famous for one crucial aspect. He walked with God. He lived before the great flood, when the world was mired in wickedness. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, says Genesis 6:5, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. Yet in this dark setting, Enoch shone as a righteous man. Enoch descended from the line of Seth, the son of Adam recognized for his righteousness. Enoch's own son, Methuselah, was the longest living man recorded in the Bible at 969 years. Enoch's family line would eventually lead to Noah, who played a key role in humanity's renewal after the flood. This link highlights Enoch's importance, yet it was not just his ancestry that made him special, it was how he lived. The Bible says, Enoch walked with God, then he was no more because God took him away. Genesis 5:24. Short though it is, this verse is profoundly significant. Walking with God suggests far more than obeying laws. It implies a close, continuous relationship marked by constant communication, trust, and devotion. Such closeness to God led to an extraordinary event. Enoch never tasted death. His experience has fascinated believers for generations, prompting questions about how a relationship with God can transcend our normal bounds. By faith Enoch was taken from this life, says Hebrews 11:5-6, so that he did not experience death. He could not be found, because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. Ancient writings, like the Book of Enoch, not part of the Bible's main canon, expand on his divine encounters. They portray him as a scribe of righteousness, revealing divine mysteries and acting as an intermediary between God and humankind. In these accounts, Enoch journeys through heaven, receiving visions of the future and insights into God's plans, illustrating why God might have directly taken him into heaven. Enoch's life shows us that genuine righteousness involves more than outward deeds. It is about nurturing a true bond with God. Some see Enoch's being taken to heaven as a foreshadowing of the concept of the rapture, offering assurance that God rewards faith and obedience in ways beyond human comprehension. Our next figure is Elijah, a fierce and daring prophet in Israel's history. He spoke God's truth at a time when King Ahab and Queen Jezebel led Israel into severe idolatry, turning the people to Baal worship. With so many drawn away, Elijah emerged as a lone but steadfast advocate for the one true God. His very name, meaning Yahweh is my God, reflected his unyielding devotion. The Bible first shows him in 1 Kings 17, announcing a long drought as punishment for Israel's sins. As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word. This challenge also confronted Baal, who was wrongly believed to be the giver of rain and fertility. Through that drought, God provided for Elijah miraculously, first by ravens feeding him near a small brook, and later through the hospitality of a widow at Zarephath. These wonders deepened Elijah's dependence on God, teaching him that God can sustain his people in the bleakest times. One of the most memorable events in Elijah's life happened on Mount Carmel, where he faced 450 prophets of Baal. It was a direct test. They would each offer a bull on an altar. The deity answering with fire would be proven the real God. The prophets of Baal cried out fervently, but nothing happened. Elijah then prayed a simple prayer to the Lord, and fire came down from heaven, consuming the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and even the water poured over it. Awestruck, the people fell on their faces, shouting, "The Lord, He is God." The false prophets were put to death, and Elijah prayed for rain, ending the drought. Though victorious, Elijah soon faced Jezebel's wrath, and fear led him to flee. Weary and feeling isolated, he hid in the wilderness until God spoke to him on Mount Horeb, not through wind, earthquake, or fire, but in a still, small voice. This taught him that God often works quietly, guiding his people with gentle whispers of truth. Elijah's life concluded in 2 Kings 2 when he was taken to heaven in a whirlwind, accompanied by a chariot of fire. As Elisha watched, he received a double portion of Elijah's spirit, continuing Elijah's prophetic work. Elijah's ascension showed that even in times of national moral decay, a faithful servant can achieve amazing things through God's power. It also points ahead to future events described in the New Testament regarding believers being caught up to meet the Lord. Finally, we have Melchizedek, a shadowy king-priest introduced in Genesis 14. After Abraham's triumph over hostile kings, Melchizedek, king of Salem and priest of God Most High, approached him. He gave bread and wine, blessed Abraham, and said, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and praise be to God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hand." Abraham then gave Melchizedek a tenth of his spoils, recognizing his spiritual authority. It was unusual in the ancient world for someone to be both a king and a priest, but Melchizedek uniquely combined these roles. Hebrews 7 focuses on him, saying he was without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life, resembling the Son of God. He remains a priest forever. Some scholars interpret him simply as a historical king-priest, his story preserved to show genuine worship of God outside Abraham's immediate family. Others see him as a foreshadowing or even an early manifestation of Christ, citing the mystery around his parentage and his eternal priesthood. Psalm 110:4 also prophesies, "You are a priest forever, in the order of Melchizedek," a verse later linked to Jesus in Hebrews. Melchizedek's example highlights Jesus' higher, everlasting priesthood that doesn't rely on ancestry, but on God's direct appointment. Reflecting on Enoch, Elijah, and Melchizedek reveals important truths about faith, trust, and God's unending purposes. Their accounts are not just historical curiosities, they speak to us today, urging us to consider our own commitment to God. They show how faith involves more than a casual belief. It's a surrendered way of life, open to God's extraordinary work. Enoch's life, briefly described in Genesis 5:24, is a model of walking consistently with God. This day-by-day closeness ultimately lifted him beyond death. His example invites us to ask, do we seek God daily, listening for His voice and aligning our path with His will? In our busy and distracted era, Enoch's testimony shows that a sincere, ongoing relationship with God can bring remarkable results. Elijah's bold spirit reminds us that true faith can stand firm, even under strong resistance. He spoke out for God when most around him worshipped idols. Though challenged and threatened, Elijah trusted that God would sustain him and prove himself as the only God. In our own lives, we face pressures to compromise our beliefs or go along with popular trends. Elijah's firmness of purpose challenges us to hold fast, trusting God to see us through. Melchizedek underscores the idea of a holy priesthood that exists outside human tradition. His mysterious role as King of Salem and priest of God Most High prepared the way for understanding Jesus' eternal priesthood, which surpasses the old system. Through Jesus, we have continuous access to God, underscoring that spiritual power comes from divine calling, not merely from human lineage. Taken together, these three lives remind us that faith must be lived out daily and with courage. They show that when a person commits fully to God, amazing things can happen. Their stories connect with a broader human longing to reach beyond mortality and encounter the divine. Throughout history, people from many cultures have shared this quest to break free from the limits of earthly life. They've told tales and myths about immortals, or those lifted to a higher realm, reflecting a universal desire to touch eternity. Greek mythology has the story of Tithonus, granted everlasting life but denied eternal youth, leading to endless aging without release. This myth cautions that immortality by itself can be a sorrow if unlinked to the life of the divine. The Chinese legends of the Eight Immortals describe individuals who gain supernatural powers through discipline and virtue, again showing that the path to transcendence demands transformation. The legend of the Wandering Jew depicts a man cursed to roam endlessly for taunting Jesus, showing that immortality without God's grace can be a burden rather than a blessing. In contrast, Elijah's ascension was a glorious vindication of a life devoted to God's work, and Melchizedek's portrayal as a priest forever emphasizes a holy permanence full of purpose. These stories reveal a collective human hope that death is not our end, but Enoch, Elijah, and Melchizedek stand out because their experiences came from a genuine bond with God and service to His plan. Their lives point to a divine solution to our deep yearning for something that outlasts this life. As you consider these accounts, ask yourself, are you walking closely with God the way Enoch did? Do you stand boldly for truth, like Elijah, even when it's unpopular? Do you grasp the profound nature of Jesus' endless priesthood, hinted at by Melchizedek, understanding that his work is eternal and offers you direct fellowship with God? Their lives show us that following God is a lifelong, eternal journey. They inspire us to deepen our faith, to submit our will to God, and to trust in the hope He gives that goes beyond what we see in this world. Imitating Enoch's daily devotion, Elijah's resolve, and Melchizedek's timeless connection to God leads us into a relationship full of hope and strength. Thank you for joining this discussion. We hope these insights help you reflect on your own faith journey. Please continue to grow in understanding, and remember that these figures teach us faith can bring us into a greater reality beyond our earthly limits. Elijah's life was filled with wonders and miracles, yet it was his deep faith and unwavering submission to God's purpose that set him apart. From his initial announcement to King Ahab, through his mighty victory on Mount Carmel, and finally to his departure in a whirlwind, Elijah's story shows what one person can achieve by wholeheartedly following God. His legacy is more than a series of astonishing acts. It's a powerful reminder of the impact faith, endurance, and courage can have when one stands for the truth. Elijah's journey began in the desolate land of Gilead, a place as spiritually barren as Israel itself under King Ahab's rule. Scripture gives few details about Elijah's background, which adds to the sense of mystery. He suddenly steps into the biblical record, speaking few words but showing remarkable conviction, starting with a direct declaration to King Ahab. Under the influence of Queen Jezebel, Baal worship thrived in Israel, and Elijah's announcement of a drought directly challenged not only Ahab, but also the pagan system that had taken root. This was a clear sign of conflict between Israel's true God and the false gods of Canaan, and it set in motion an unforgettable chain of events that tested the faith of the whole nation. After confronting Ahab, God told Elijah to hide by the brook Cherith, east of the Jordan. There, ravens delivered bread and meat daily, demonstrating God's miraculous care. This solitude was about more than physical sustenance. It was a spiritual retreat. In that remote place, Elijah discovered a profound reliance on God that would shape him for future trials. As the drought continued, the brook eventually dried up, and God guided Elijah to Zarephath, deep in a region known for Baal worship. There he met a widow preparing a final meal for herself and her son before surrendering to death. Yet in that desperate situation, Elijah offered words of hope. "Do not be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first make a small loaf of bread for me. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry." Though it seemed audacious, the widow trusted Elijah, and a miracle unfolded. The flour and oil never ran out, providing food throughout the drought. This demonstrated not only God's care, but also confirmed Elijah's role as a prophet who brought both judgment and blessing, challenging people to trust God in dire times. With the drought raging on, tensions rose. God commanded Elijah to meet King Ahab once more, promising the end of the drought. That gathering set the scene for Mount Carmel, one of the Bible's greatest confrontations. Elijah, the sole prophet of the Lord, stood against 450 prophets of Baal. "How long will you waver between two opinions?" Elijah asked. "If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." The people, fearful and uncertain, remained silent. Elijah suggested a test. Each side would prepare a sacrifice, and the God who answered by fire would be declared the true God. From dawn until noon, the prophets of Baal cried out with no reply. Elijah taunted them, "Shout louder, surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought or busy or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping." Then Elijah took his turn. He rebuilt the ruined altar of the Lord with 12 stones for the tribes of Israel, dug a trench around it, and soaked the sacrifice with water until the trench was filled. Praying, he said, "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God." Instantly, fire from heaven consumed everything: sacrifice, wood, stones, and water. Struck with reverence, the crowd shouted, "The Lord, he is God!" Idolatry was condemned, and the prophets of Baal were executed in the valley. With that spiritual battle won, Elijah prayed for rain. On his 7th request, a tiny cloud appeared over the sea, and soon the sky darkened with storms, ending the long drought. But despite this victory, Elijah's trials were not done. Jezebel vowed to kill him for what happened at Carmel, so he fled in fear. Alone in the wilderness, he prayed to die. "I have had enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life." Exhausted and hopeless, he collapsed. But an angel woke him, providing food and drink, and reminding him the journey was long. Strengthened, Elijah traveled to Mount Horeb, where God asked him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Elijah poured out his sorrow and frustration. "I've been very zealous for the Lord, but I'm the only one left, and they're trying to kill me too." Instead of scolding him, God revealed himself in a gentle whisper, not in the wind, earthquake, or fire. This showed Elijah that the Almighty often works quietly, and that his power isn't always in grand events, but also in soft nudges that change hearts. Then God instructed Elijah to anoint new leaders and to call Elisha as his successor, ensuring that Elijah's mission would continue. This transition highlights how God's work goes on beyond any single person, carried forward by those prepared for the task. Nearing the end of his time on earth, Elijah found Elisha, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen. Elijah threw his cloak over Elisha, symbolizing the passing of prophetic authority. Elisha's readiness was shown when he destroyed his farming tools and oxen, feeding the people before leaving to follow Elijah fully. They journeyed together, and when they came to the Jordan River, Elijah parted the waters with his cloak, and they crossed on dry ground. Knowing he would soon depart, Elijah asked Elisha what he could give him. Elisha asked for a double portion of Elijah's spirit. Elijah replied it would be his if he witnessed Elijah being taken away. Suddenly, a chariot of fire with horses of fire separated them, and Elijah went to heaven in a whirlwind. My father, Elisha cried. Then Elijah was gone. Grieving, Elisha tore his clothes, but he lifted Elijah's fallen cloak, struck the Jordan with it, and the waters parted again. This miracle confirmed that Elijah's spirit rested on Elisha, who then performed many wonders of his own. Elijah's life is a rich lesson for every believer. It displays unwavering dedication to God's commands, faith that stands firm despite threats, and the reality that even God's mightiest servants can face despair and fear. Yet God's grace supported him at every step, providing sustenance in times of need and gentle correction in times of doubt. His encounter with God on Mount Horeb reminds us that while God can act powerfully, He also speaks through the quiet. We learn that closeness with God grows when we stop to listen. Elijah's mentorship of Elisha stresses the importance of guiding future generations, ensuring that God's message continues. Confronting the prophets of Baal shows the necessity of standing for truth, no matter how outnumbered we feel. It challenges us to tear down idols in our own lives and to trust in the one true God. Above all, Elijah's story testifies to God's faithfulness. Despite the threats, loneliness, and dangers, God never left him. That same divine loyalty applies to us today, assuring us that God will remain with us through every struggle. Elijah's story is not a mere relic of the past. It calls us to examine our faith, to be courageous when we face opposition, and to rest in God's never-failing support. May we draw strength from his example, living with the same boldness and devotion, and glorifying God through a faith that endures no matter what life brings. Elijah left a legacy that still radiates hope and wisdom for believers everywhere, showing that true greatness is found in living faithfully for God. Thank you for reading through Elijah's narrative. May you be encouraged and challenged by his faith, and may your own walk with God grow deeper each day.